Let's do some starts and sits here on Fantasy Football Today Express. All right, we've got some AFC home games to talk about. 7 games. We just did some long previews, but I love the way Heath breaks it down. Real simple advice, and then we can get into whatever we need to expand on here. But we'll start with Tampa Bay and Kansas City. What are your thoughts on this game? Who are the tricks and who are the treats?
It feels like there's more tricks than treats in this game. The only real must start, I would say, are the tight ends. K-Dot and Travis Kelce, both top 5 tight ends. I'm starting Kareem Hunt as a low-end RB2. Rashad White and Bucky Irving are both high-end flexes, but I would prefer White over Bucky. I'd prefer Baker over Mahomes, but they're both QB2s. There's not a wide receiver in this game in my top 30, but Xavier Worthy would be my favorite, followed by McMillan and then DeAndre Hopkins.
Okay, Denver is at Baltimore. This is a pretty interesting game. You've got a great offense in Baltimore, but also a great defense for Baltimore in terms of fantasy points allowed. So who do we like in Denver and Baltimore?
I'm pretty much just starting my Ravens. Lamar, Henry, Zay, Andrews are all ranked as starters, and I don't have a lot of concerns about them. Javonte is a high-end flex. Cortland Sutton's a good number 3 wide receiver. I would flex Sutton over Javonte. Bo Nix is a high-end QB2. That is pretty much it.
Well, let's talk about Zay Flowers, though, right? And how we're thinking about him versus possibly Patrick Surtain to die on Halloween.
Yeah, I think there was probably a better Zay and a better Flowers name there, but it's a short podcast, so I'm not going to take the time to think about it. We talked about it on the big show. I don't think Zay Flowers is the type of wide receiver that you have to worry as much about star corners, partially because he has a 40% slot rate, partially because his stylistically, the smaller, shiftier wide receivers are harder to shut down by one guy.
Yeah, it'd be pretty interesting to see. And then we're expecting Deontay Johnson to play, right?
Yeah, but like what, 20 snaps maybe?
Right. We've seen this experiment before with Amari Cooper and DeAndre Hopkins.
Right.
Colts are at the Vikings.
So, yeah, welcome back, Joe Flacco. Thank you very much. We're going to start Josh Downs. We're definitely going to start Jonathan Taylor. I'm viewing Michael Pittman more like a low-end number 3 wide receiver. I think the other guys are more excited about starting him than I am. You start Justin Jefferson, obviously. You start Aaron Jones, obviously. I'm starting Sam Darnold as a top 12 quarterback. I'd view Flacco as more of a number 2. But it's worth saying that over the past 2 years, he's averaged more than 24 fantasy points per game as a starting quarterback. So I might be a little bit too low on Flacco. Hawkinson, I'd like to wait, but I'm also not that interested in carrying 2 tight ends. So I understand if you have to start him, not ranking him as a starter.
Chargers are at the Cleveland Browns.
So another one where it's kind of like, I would start Jameis over Herbert. They're both QB2s. I would start Dobbins over Chubb. Dobbins is a top 20 guy. Chubb is right around 30 for me, so more of a flex. Lad McConkey is my favorite wide receiver in this game. He's a borderline number 2. Tillman's a boom bust number 3. One more big game, though, and he'll have to move into that number 2 range. Elijah Moore is a fine PPR flex. Will Disley is okay. David Njoku is a must start.
People, maybe this was not intentional, but people honestly act like Jerry Jeudy did not exist last week, and he also had a good game last week.
Yeah, he does exist.
He exists. Okay, I think Chargers Browns is going to be one of the games we get the most questions about. Not people are going to ask us about the game, but the players in the game. There are a lot of potential flexes in this game. Miami at Buffalo. Who do you like here?
The Bills. I'm starting Josh Allen. I'm starting James Cook. I'm starting Dalton Kincaid mostly, unless you could get K-Dotton. I would go Cooper, then Coleman, then Shakir. They're all number 3 wide receivers. But if Cooper is out, then Coleman and Shakir move closer to wide receiver 24. Tyreek is a must start. Achane is a must start. Waddle's a borderline number 2, better as a number 3. Mostert's a touchdown dependent flex. I want no part of Tua.
Let's take a quick break, grab some butterscotch candies. I'm not wearing the old man costume anymore, so that joke I should have used that. Damn it, I should have used that joke on the big show. Yeah. All right, we'll be right back on Fantasy Football Today Express. Las Vegas is at Cincinnati. Who are we starting?
I am starting my Bengals. Joe Burrow, start of the week, Chase Brown, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins if he plays. I am starting Alexander Madison as a number 2 running back, starting Jacoby Myers as the number 2 wide receiver, starting Brock Bowers. Is this the easiest game on the slate? It feels like it is.
I think it is. I think Madison is the only tricky one, and I'm a little nervous about him just in case he does lose work to Zamir White. He has such a low floor if that's the case. But yeah, it's a pretty easy game. New England at Tennessee.
Okay, so I would start Tony Pollard. I think Ramondre is a high-end flex. I think I have Calvin Ridley as a borderline number 2 wide receiver. I'm a lot more interested in both Demario Douglas and Hunter Henry if Drake May plays. Henry's a borderline tight end 1. Douglas would be a PPR number 3 if we get Drake May. If Brissett's starting, you don't start any Patriots besides maybe Ramondre Stevenson.
I'll call my shot on this one. I think Christian Gonzalez is going to do a very good job against Calvin Ridley, and it's going to be a tough game for him.
You've been a big supporter of Christian Gonzalez. I guess I would get bet if we had like some way of rating wide receivers by how many fantasy points they have allowed, and then how many times we've said their name on this fantasy podcast. Christian Gonzalez ratio would be pretty insane.
He's an interesting one because he has, forgot who he played recently. He really did not do a good job at all. Oh, it was Brian Thomas Jr., which to me really says a lot about Brian Thomas Jr. Gonzalez is not there yet. He is not a guy that you just completely avoid, but he has had some good performances this year. Jamar Chase in week 1 struggled. Garrett Wilson caught a touchdown, but it was certainly a struggle against Gonzalez. And the thing is, he's just one of those players where I pretty much know they are going to put him on Calvin Ridley. There aren't that many teams where I know that the number 1 quarterback is going to do that. And Ridley is a guy that just struggles with good corners. Is Gonzalez good enough? I don't know. I think he is good enough to shut down or to do a good job against Calvin Ridley.
I will lower Ridley if Levis plays.
Yeah. Last week was really encouraging for Ridley because he had a season low ADOT, about 11 yards. His ADOT is about 18 yards for the season, which is absurd, way too high. But Will Levis loves to chuck the ball downfield. It's not sustainable to have an ADOT that high. Mason Rudolph used him in a way that is much more sustainable, much more reliable for fantasy. So, yeah, and they seem to want to get Levis back. At least publicly they're saying that. So we'll see. So we have a couple minutes for questions here. Marvin Harrison Jr. or Amari Cooper? Standard score.
I'll go with Marvin Harris.
All right. It's not easy for Harrison, though, right? I mean, did you got the Bears? That's not an easy matchup.
Yeah, but non-PPR is probably his better format.
Matthew Stafford or Kyler Murray?
I'm glad you asked about Matthew Stafford because I'm definitely the low guy on Stafford this week. I would start Kyler over him. It's just hard for me to make that big of an impact over one game. And he was really good for about half the time that he had both these wide receivers last year also. But I'm starting Kyler. I'm not starting Stafford this week.
Darnold or Aaron Rodgers? Ramondre Stevenson, Bucky Irving, Tank Bigsby, Amari Cooper. Pick one.
So I would go with Darnold and I would go with Tank as long as ETN is out. If ETN is back, then I'd go with Darnold and Ramondre.
TJ Hawkinson or Dalton Schultz?
I have both of those guys on a lot of teams, and most of the places I'm dropping Schultz because I don't want to carry him, but I do have Schultz projected higher. So if you have enough roster spots, it's Schultz.
Cortland Sutton or Tank Dell?
I'll go Sutton.
Matthew Stafford or Kyler Murray? Did I do that one?
Kyler Murray again.
Yeah, did that one. Josh Downs or Kareem Hunt in PPR?
Downs.
Geno or Kyler?
Kyler.
Should I trade Chubba for Chubb?
I'd rather have Chubb rest of season.
Nick Chubb over Chuba Hubbard. All right, thanks everybody. Enjoy your Halloween. Enjoy that candy. Yeah, don't go to Heath's house. You ain't getting anything. Get a toothbrush. And we'll talk to you tomorrow on FFT Express.